am pushing for something that's called Back to the Village. And I'm saying, each one of you, I tell a story of how I left my village. And in simple terms, my headmaster, I'm doing grade 6, my headmaster calls my parents and says, I'm throwing your son out of my school. And my parents are befuddled because I'm doing very well in school. School liked me and I liked school. My grades were good. So they say, why are you throwing our son out of his school? He says to them, the reason that your son is doing so well is the reason I'm throwing him out of my school. Because if he does grade 7 in this village school, he's not going to make it to secondary school. He needs to be in a city school that's going to sharpen him and open his mind so that he has a chance to go into secondary school. That's how I left the village. That's how I was thrown out of the village. As a result of that, I'm the only one of 7 siblings who managed to go to secondary school. No one in my family went to secondary school because they all were in school in the village. But having gone through school now, here is this boy from the village who is now, headed organizations, lived abroad, traveled the world, has been all over the place. How many of you know that I have an obligation to my village? And so I've come back, I have an obligation to my village. Some of us would say, well, I don't care about my village. If I go back to some of your villages here, as a pastor, I've been embarrassed sometimes when you go to bury your father or your mother. You go to the village and they're living in a hole, in a little hole in the ground. Meanwhile, you live in a palace in Borodale. And there's a disconnect as far as I'm concerned here. There's something wrong where we have become so sophisticated and so Western that we've actually ignored the village. If you go to some villages today, they are derelict. Because there's no one, to go back to that village. Did you know that over 60% of our population is still in the rural areas? And if we are going to develop Zimbabwe, let me tell you, it's going to be one village at a time. We need to understand that we need to go back to the village. Each one of us here comes from a village somewhere. It may not be, your village may not be Mondoro or Logwe or Maboleni like me. Your village may be Highfields. Your village may be Borodale. The village is the place where you grew up, where you are familiar with everything around you, where you know everybody. In the village, I knew everybody. The customs shaped my life. The village confined me, told me that there were certain things I could do and there were certain things I couldn't do. It has never been done here before, they'll tell you. So that village mentality, wherever you come from, there's a certain mentality that you grew up in that confines you. As transformational leaders, we need to go back to those situations and bring about transformation. You have a debt that you owe to your village. And for us here as blacks in Zimbabwe, if we think that, transformation is only going to be in the cities alone, we are fooling ourselves. There's over 60% of our population that's out there. And do you know what's happening right now? There's an incredible urbanization that's going on in Zimbabwe. Because people are leaving the villages for a better hope in the cities. And our cities were not built for the kinds of population that they're handling now. And guess what? The problem that's in the village ends up being your problem here. Because of the rapid urbanization, the services, we're not able to handle the masses of people that are coming into the cities. Accommodation, right now as a country, we are short by over 1 million houses in this nation. Just housing alone. I'm not talking about job creation, I'm not talking about all these things. So people in this country believe that in the cities, life is better. So young people are leaving the villages in droves to come to town, and guess what? They come into town and they're disillusioned because the dream they hope they were going to fulfill is not there. They have no jobs. They are hungry, end up in crime, in prostitution, and all that sort of thing. So, my vision, my dream, is a Back to the Village campaign, where each one of us goes back to our village somewhere, whether it's Highfield, whether it's Mondoro, whether it's Borodale, whatever your village. I'm challenging you to go up to the place that raised you and begin to give something back. What would happen if some of us went back to our schools and bought them a few footballs? And took some interest in some development in that school, built a class or did something. What would happen if we gave back to society? The trouble with black people in Africa is that civic institutions are not something that we commit to. This is our English. All people's homes, you want me to contribute? No, I look after my own mother. You know, that's our nature, but things have changed, folks. And we've got to be willing to contribute to bring about transformation in some of these, civic institutions, in some of these public, institutions that benefit our community and bring development to our country. There's a bishop that listened to me one time, and he's gone back to his village, and it's amazing what he's doing in his village. I haven't got time to describe his project, but he's bought into the project and he's bringing about incredible transformation. It involves schools, it involves women, it involves projects and so on. He's doing an incredible job. I want to challenge each one of you to think about your village. Yeah, I know we're talking about these projects here, but I want you to think about your village.